All praise going on is most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and peace to you in the name of Jesus. This is your brother Elisha Israel of the House of Faith. I count it truly a blessing each and every single time that I can come before to preach the word of God, and never do count it as a light thing to do so. Just a little bit about the Household of Faith. We meet every Sabbath at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Gary, Indiana at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel, as well as at www.israelteach.org. Just another announcement. I'll be in Columbus, Ohio on Saturday, as well as on Sunday. Well, I'll be there Friday even, but we'll have public meetings on Saturday, and Sunday. That is, just give you the dates real quick. The time, we'll be at the libraries there. So we will be on Saturday from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. We'll be in the Linden branch of the library system there in Columbus, Ohio. That's October 26th. And October 27th, we'll be in the Northern Lights branch from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. So if you're in the Columbus area, come out fellowship with us, hear the word of God. And we look forward to that. My brother Albert there. And with that, I'm going to get right into today's lesson. I'm coming on late. It's just what it is. I want to pick it up in the book of Psalms. And I want to talk about basically raising our children. And, one thing I'm noticing, you see it just in the world, particularly amongst our people, and I'm talking in general, but actually I'm speaking specifically to men, is that we have to be there for our children. And when we are not there, I always liken it to like how a farmer, he just throws some seeds out in the wind and they hoping they hit a field, and he doesn't fertilize the soil, he doesn't water the soil, he doesn't cultivate the soil, he doesn't use a plow, he doesn't hoe, he doesn't use any of the tools and instruments of cultivation for that field. He just throws the seed into the wind and walks away. That's not a recipe or not a good plan for success. What's going to happen is you're going to have weeds overtake the plants or the seeds that grow, if they grow at all. And that's what you see amongst our people. What you see fields of uncultivated vegetation when it comes to our children. Our children are in desperate need of direction. And so often we look at our children and want to make claims about them and say, this is a wicked generation. Well, yeah, the generation before them was wicked. They are a reflection of us as a generation. So all their deficiencies truly fall on us. Have we directed them? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And we are not really treating our children as the beneficial the beneficial thing that they are, which we're going to read here in Psalms 127. This is Psalms 127th division. Peace to everybody that's listening. Verse 3, it said, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward." Okay, so they come from the Lord. Okay, and they are his reward, heritage. And you think about legacy. Are you really concerned with legacy? You should be. It's all about the generation to come. He says, "As arrows on the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." So children are a blessing, brothers and sisters. Now let's go to 1 Timothy, because I'm dealing particularly with children, and I'm speaking to men. Because our communities are in disarray. We have so many women led households, female led households. They're the head of households. And even when men are there, they still the head of household. Well, let's look at the duty of men, what men are supposed to do. We can pick it up at I want to pick it up at I want to pick it up with 1 Timothy. And I'm going to pick it up at 1 Timothy 5, and I'm going to pick it up at verse 8. Because we as men have something to do. And what we have to do is take care of our families. Here, Paul reiterates that point in his first epistle to Timothy, where he says, but if any provide not for his own, I'm in verse 8, 1 Timothy 5 and 8. But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he have denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. When you really look at Torah, and when you really understand, you should understand that he makes allotments or provisions for those that need. For example, he has a welfare system. When you look at how the gleaning took place, you see that in the book of Ruth. You see how women who maybe are widowed and how they didn't have their deceased husband didn't have seed or male seed that was an heir. You see how the liberate law, things are in place. And ultimately, it's on the men to provide those provisions. It is on the men to take care of their wives, to take care of their families, and to be the head of their households. And they are the head amongst human beings in the divine order. You got the Father, Son, but then you have man, woman, and child. And as the head, you have to provide for your household. We live in a society today where that seems archaic. But when you look at what's going on and the okie doke that's been played on us, it's as if being in the workplace for a woman is the best place to be. I'm not saying a woman can't work, but what I am saying is that a man has to work. A man has to provide for his household. So he says, but if any provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he have denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So in other words, you can't talk about God and claim you believe in him if you're not providing for your seed, if you're not providing for your household. He's saying you're worse than an infidel. And understand, this is not talking about somebody who, you working your tail off and then you happen to lose your job, or you got laid off of the job, folded or something. You looking, you trying. That's not what it's really talking about. It's talking about the one who isn't doing anything. And you see so much of that apathy, and that's just passed on. And we got things backwards. So now we are teaching, our people are teaching women to be in a position of men, and men are taking a position of women. I was telling somebody the other day, it is extremely hard. I can't remember who I was talking to, but anyway, it's extremely hard. You have to make a concerted effort to be what you naturally should be in this society, because this society is teaching you to be something else. It's teaching men to be women. It's teaching women to be men. And we all have specific roles, and when we don't play our specific roles, things are out of order. And you see it so much with our people. We need men in our households. We need men to take care of our children. We are the first men are the barrier against poverty for women and children. We are the barrier against death by violence. We are the barrier against our children being incarcerated. We are the barrier against them being uneducated or miseducated. We are the barrier. We are the protector of the family. That's what the father is. He is the strength of the household. He's like the pole in the tent. He's holding it up. But when you take the pole out of the tent, you don't have a tent. You don't have a tabernacle. You have a tarp. And that's what we have in our communities, a bunch of tarps. A bunch of tarps. Let's go to Psalms. Or Proverbs, actually, excuse me. Let's go to Proverbs, the 22nd chapter, because it's something that you're supposed to teach your children. You're supposed to provide for them and give them the monetary things. But there's something that you also have to do in addition to that. This is Proverbs, the 22nd chapter, verse 6. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, And when he is old, he will not depart from it. So you have to train up your child. You can't just provide for them, and you also have to instruct them. You have to instruct them. And it tells us also, Paul tells us that in the New Testament. Let's go to Ephesians, because you got to train them up in a certain way. We're going to find out exactly what that way is. In Ephesians, the 6th chapter, Ephesians 6, and we want to pick it up at verse 4. So here Paul in his epistle to the congregation in Ephesus, he says, "And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." So he said, don't provoke your children, but you're supposed to be bringing them up. Bringing them up in what? What's the way in which they should go? Let's look at the example of what he wrote to Timothy. We're in 2 Timothy. We're going to find out what you should bring them up in. 2 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, and verse 14. 2 Timothy 3 and verse 14, he says to Timothy, "But continue thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them." So now what was he brought up in as a child? What was he taught? It says in verse 15, "And that from a child," meaning B times or early, from a child. It says, "And that from a child thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus." He says, you've known this from a child, and that's what you should be brought up in. Let's go. I want to read some here in Proverbs, because one thing, when you talk about how to deal with children, people love to read these verses. This is Proverbs, the 13th chapter, and I want to pick it up at verse 24. It says in Proverbs 13 and 24, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes or early." Discipline is right. Discipline is good. Again, we live in a society that tells you that you shouldn't discipline your children. But we know for a fact, if we don't discipline our children, society will discipline them. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, then we understand that this unloving, unforgiving, uncaring society, the state, the police, they will discipline, and they're not going to do it out of love. Proverbs 23 and 13 says, "Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with a rod, he shall not die." This sounds like child abuse, but this is what the Bible is saying. He's saying you have to have discipline. Proverbs 29 and verse 15 says, "The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame." That's what can happen. Proverbs 22 and 15. Because many people don't even know what a child is. A child is an undeveloped human. They are developing human. Your brain doesn't stop developing or grow until you are an adult. So it says, Proverbs 22 and 15, "Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, or in the mind of a child." Why? Because they are not fully developed. He said, "But the rod of correction shall drive it far from him." It is true that the rod of correction, that discipline can save your life. Just like standards, brothers and sisters, can save your life. When you have no discipline, and no discipline is instilled within the child, behaviors that should be curtailed or corrected early on, B times or early, they just continue to grow. So, for example, you start getting in trouble with school, you start disrespecting people. I've seen it so many times where parents, particularly mothers, just being honest, just from what I see, they are less likely to discipline their children in a way that the father would. They are quick to take up for their children's foolishness, particularly boys. They don't have no mercy on the girls. But boys, they'll let them act a fool. They'll allow, oftentimes, not all the time, or they're not in a position to truly discipline them in the way in which a man would. Man, he 12, 13, 14 years old, he towering over you, and you yelling at him, and he's just looking at you like, man, shut up. He's not saying it, but that's what he's thinking. You yelling and doing all that, a man don't have to do all that. They said, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. So you need discipline. You start dealing in those things, and then I could tell early on, eventually, you stealing bikes, and soon you stealing from the store. Now you're selling dope. Next thing you know, you locked up. You doing home invasions. Now you get killed. I remember this instance, and this one young man, I knew it was evident that he was gang affiliated. And me seeing this and seeing him in my concern, and the father not there, I talked to the mother and say, you know, your son you need to talk to him. He's gang affiliated. And I'm afraid he's going to get in some trouble. Her response to me was, you don't know what the hell you talking about. Who are you? Who are you to say anything about my son? You right. Nobody. You okay? Where he at now? You guessed it. He's in prison. What is he in prison for? He's in prison for murder. He's in prison for murder. Broke into somebody's house and killed somebody. See, you don't need to, deny what the truth is. You need to curtail those things early on. Maybe that could have been avoided. Maybe that individual's life would have still been here. Maybe his life wouldn't have been destroyed. Maybe he grew up to be somebody who had a legacy of his own, but instead he's rotting in prison. Why? Because his behavior was not curtailed. Why? Because quite frankly, his mother was not in a position to do what needed to be done. And his father wasn't there doing what he was supposed to do. But even with all that discipline, which is good, you need discipline, you also have to instill in your child again. You have to instruct them in the way in which they should go. You can't just only rely on giving them what they need monetarily. Oh, you ate, you good. Or you got clothes in back, it's more than that. And you can't just rely on that and discipline. You have to, again, show them in the way in which they should go. And we are commanded as men to do that. Let's go to Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter. Deuteronomy 4, we're going to pick it up at verse 1. Now here Moses says, now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you for to do them, that ye may live and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers giveth you. So he's telling them, you need to hearken unto the instruction of the Torah that I give. He goes on to tell you, don't add unto it and don't take away from it. Then he says, only in verse 9, he says, only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life. He said, you need to take hold of these things. Then he says something, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. See, you are the spiritual head in your household, not your wife. You are not your children. You are, as the man, the head, the spiritual head, and you are responsible for leading them directly in the way in which they should go. Hold your finger here and let's go to Genesis. I'm gonna pick it up in Genesis the 20. Hold on. Let's pick it up in Genesis the 18th chapter. Yeah, Genesis the 18th chapter. Now listen to what Most High said about Abraham. It says in verse 17, Genesis 18 and 17, and the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, saying that Abraham shall surely become a great nation, a mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. He says, for I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord Train a child up in the way in which he should go. When he was old, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. What he said? He said in Timothy, and that from a child that has known the Holy Scriptures was able to make thee wise unto salvation. He says, for I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. He said, I know the man. I know he's going to lead his children in the right direction. This is Genesis, the 26th chapter. Here in these days of famine, it says in verse 1, and there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. Now this is a different generation. And Isaac went unto Abraham, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt. Don't go into Mizraim. He said, behold, in the land which he said, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee and will bless thee, for unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. Now he's going to be blessed based on what his father did. See, what a man does has ripple effects for generations. It's just like if you are a drug addict and you abandon your family, you spend large times or long periods of time in prison, and your children grow up without your protection. They grow up without the provisions that you will provide. They grow up without direction from a male that is so needed. What do you think can happen to them? Many men meet their fathers in prison. So what you did, and then they have children, and the same cycle continues. And it's true on the flip side. If you do what you're supposed to do, if you're providing for your children, if you're teaching them what they should do, if you're giving them correction and discipline when necessary, if you've done what you should do, then that also has ripples for generations. They see your example and continue the example. But so it says, so now here we see this covenant confirmed in Isaac, but it was based on what his father did. And then this is in the time of famine. It says, and I will make that seed, I'm in verse 4, 26 and 4, and I will make that seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. And he tells you why. It says, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Now, this is in a famine, not in the days of Abraham. He made that distinction. It was in the days of Isaac, and Isaac was blessed. Why? Because of what his father did. That's why. Because of what his father did. Let's go to let's see just a father. I'm going to give you an example of a father. Let's go to Job. Let's go to Job. We're going to pick it up in Job 1. And I want to just show you the mindset of a father who's worried about his children. Now, Job, we read he was a wealthy man. He feared God and eschewed evil. He hated evil. Then it says in verse 5, and it was so when the days of that feasting. Now he's talking about the feasting of his sons, and he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. It said that Job sent and sanctified them and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts and in their minds. Thus did Job continually. He did this trying to protect them and be a covert unto them. Why? Because he was worried about their spiritual well-being. You understand? That's what a father does. Let's go back to Deuteronomy. We're going to pick it up in Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter. See, it is our duty. We've been commanded in the Torah or in instruction to be the head of our households, to teach our children, instruct them in Torah. It says in verse 6 and 6. Because he says, "Hear, Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." Then he says in verse 6, "And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." It is your duty, it is your responsibility to impart the wisdom that is embedded in Scripture, that is embedded in Torah, into your children. And that means you have to know it. You can't tell them something that you don't know. Why is it that you're not taking the lead in this department? Why is it that you're depending on your woman and you say, I'll let her take the children to church? You are the head of the household. Just to show you are the head of the household. You the head. You got so many brothers that do that. I'll let her take the kids. I'm going to drink beer and watch the game. And she taking them on the wrong day on Sunday, and you ain't figured it out. Or she in the word, and you ain't doing, you half messing with it, or you ain't messing with it at all. That's out of order. Everybody should be following your lead. This is Numbers, the 30th chapter. It says, in verse 3, "If a woman also vow unto the Lord to bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, and her father hear her vow, and her bond wherewith she hath bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand." So I'm reading this is the law of vows. Now understand, if you're a man and you make a vow unto God, your father can't disannul it. But I'm pointing out that as men, you still, even in this regard, you are the protection for your household. So it says, "But if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth," meaning if he hear his daughter say a vow, even though again this don't apply to men, because men are their head spiritually, but women are come up under men. See, we don't understand the order. We don't understand the order. Hold our finger here just so we understand the order. And that's why he's talking about, even when I was reading earlier, teach it to thy sons and thy sons' sons, so you can prepare them to lead. Ephesians, the 6th chapter. Ephesians 6 and verse just 20, or actually Ephesians 5 and 22, it says, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body." Okay, so now you understand so what wives are supposed to do, they're supposed to submit. It don't tell them when you're talking about loving your husband, it's talking about you be in subjection, be obedient. It gives you the example of Sarah, how she called Abraham Lord. It said, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord." Then it says, "For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church." You see, so it's telling the men, he said, "Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it." So now you're supposed to love your wives, but you're supposed to take care of your household in general. In chapter 6 and 1, it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Because that woman and that man and the woman, they are bringing forth seed, and that's creating a family. So that's the order. And it's in other places, but that's the order. Man, woman, and child. So now here in Numbers 30, it said, "But if her father," in verse 5, "but if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth, now any of her vows or her bonds wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her because her father disallowed it." And he could do the same thing with his wife. Again, you can't read it, it apply to men. Why? Because you are the head, spiritual head. And so really, when you look at us condition, it take men repairing it. It take men getting back into their proper place. It take men becoming men. It take men acting as fathers, and not just husbandmen that just throw the seeds in the wind. No, you have to cultivate what you plant. That's the burden of men. And understand, under those conditions, women should play their proper role. But right now, they not in their role. Men not even in the house. Or if they are in the house, they're not running the house, or they're not running it properly according to Torah instructions. See, this is a beautiful thing. This is a manual. It shows you what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. So if you don't know, you can look and find out. You can pray, you can get the answer. It's here for you. So if you didn't know how to be a man, like I always said, if you didn't know how to be a man, a father, and a husband, it can teach you how. If you don't know how to be a woman, you don't know how to be a wife and a mother, it can teach you how. And if you don't know, because many of us that did not have that example. So we don't know, but it's here showing you what you should do. It's showing you how he thinks about fatherhood. So you could do what you should do. And with that, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you, we're at the House of the Faith. Meet every Sabbath at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Gary, Indiana, at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel, as well as at www.israelteach.org. If you've been edified through the ministry and you'd like to leave a donation, you could do so on our website. Again, www.israelteach.org. 100% of the proceeds goes to the work of the ministry, not in our pockets. Also, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you that I'll be in Columbus, Ohio on Saturday, October 26th from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. This is October 26, 2019, from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. This is in Columbus, Ohio, in the library, in the Linden branch in meeting room 2. And I'll be in the Northern Lights branch on Sunday, October 27th from 1 to 4:30. And with that, brothers and sisters, peace to everybody. And it's always my prayer that you were edified.